Hi, it's Paula from Pola Quilting. Welcome back to my channel. It's a third tutorial now. I'm working with some strip sets made from the strings and the black fabrics to kind of frame it and make different shapes. So those are the scraps from my last two tutorials. This is the one I created in this tutorial strings. I've made them wider than I needed, and then when I kind of trimmed them to what I actually needed for that tutorial, this is what I've got. I've got some wider and some narrower pieces left. And obviously I had lots of black fabric also leftovers from when I was trimming the shapes. And in this tutorial I kind of used those blocks from the previous one and kind of moved on with another step, and again that produced quite a lot of black scraps. And I was telling you in both of those tutorials to not worry about the scraps because I'm gonna find a way how to use those. So the black fabric source was a shirt, black shirt, butternut shirt, and the bed sheet I had bought for to make a costume for my son for Halloween, so I had the other part left. So the remainder of the black sheet I cut into 5-inch strips. That will be kind of handy size for what I want to do now. And I will also use all of my scraps. Well, I don't know if all, but quite a lot of scraps will be used in this tutorial as well. I will also need some 1-inch strips, and I cut it before I kind of chopped the other one piece. And I will need 1 8-inch strip long for each block, and I'm making 8 of those blocks, so not a lot of that fabric is needed here. Now I only use that to make some of the blocks kind of that strip wider, because I didn't have a lot of wide ones. I had a lot of very narrow ones, and I really wanted to have a little bit more of those strip sets in the block, so that's why I will be using this small strip to kind of make it little bit bigger, but I will show you in a minute what I mean. So in this design I will be making 3 different blocks. Block 1, I will use those wider strips here. This one is about 2.5 inches more or less. So if you have some maybe adding tape strips you've done, that will be good time to use it, and you would like to trim it to about 2.5-3 inches. Again, it doesn't have to be even the same size for the blocks. You can vary whatever you've got, you can use for that. For the second block I will use, like I said, those narrower ones with some sashing in between. I will walk you through that in a minute. And for the block 3 I will be using all the scraps from those 2 blocks plus whatever I've got in my box from the previous tutorial scraps to put those together for the remainder of the blocks needed for the design. Also to mention, I changed now my blade, which I reviewed in this video. If you'd like to know more about this, then please follow up on this tutorial. Well, it's not tutorial, it's just to show you how much work I've done with this blade, but time came to change it, and I think it did a really good job. So on this tutorial I've got my new blade. One more tip before I start making those blocks. I do have a 10.5-inch ruler which I'll be using for those blocks to square them up. If you don't have it, obviously bigger ruler you've got, the 12.5-inch maybe will be enough to square it up the block, but it will be also good to have some sort of template, so when you layer the fabrics around you kind of know how much you need to add around. So you can just cut a piece of paper or carton box to size 10.5-inch. You won't need that to trim your block, you will just need that to make sure that you have you can gauge how much fabric you need to add around it. But you will see once I start putting the blocks together what I mean as well. So let's get started with the block number 1, and that is going to be the block with those narrower strips. So first a little bit of prep, because I don't want those strips to be that long. I don't mind how wide they are. They're probably, I don't know, some of them are around 1 inch, little bit over 1.5. It's all good with the width of it. I'm not worried about that, but what I need to do is trim them to the size, and I want them to be 8 inches long. So I will just quickly trim a few of those. Let's do for 2 pieces per block, so let me take 4 pieces. I will trim them to 8 inches, and whilst I'm on it I will also trim my black piece, which obviously need to match my strip, so they will be 8 inches long. It's 1 inch wide, and I need one piece per blocks. So let's just quickly trim them. This ruler is 8 inches, so I'll just trim this side first, and then I can turn those strips around and cut them to 8 inches. Okay, so all of those cut-offs, I'll just pop them into my adding tape block box, because I can still reuse them there, so nothing disappears, it's just changing a kind of purpose. So now it's quick and easy sewing. I will take 2 of those strips, put the black strip in the middle and just sew it all together. Nothing complicated here, just thread stitching. You can or you don't have to use the 1/4 inch allowance here. As far as you stitch straight, it's going to be good to go. So just quick stitching of those. Because I'm working on 2 blocks at a time, then obviously I can easily chain piece it. If you know how many blocks you want to make, then obviously you can chain piece everything in one go. I will be making 8 for my design, but after you see how it all looks together, you may decide that actually you want to make whole of that top with just one type of the block, and that's fine as well, or maybe just some, or maybe you don't have that many narrower pieces and you don't want to cut the bigger ones to smaller. It's what you like and what's your preference, so just kind of calculate how many of those you need. I will take them to the ironing board now, just to make it nice and flat, and we'll be ready to do the next step. My pieces are stitched. I did iron, is nice and flat. Because I use 1/4 inch, those edges here are nicely in the middle. If your seam allowance was bigger, they would have overlapped, but I wouldn't worry about it either. But if it bothers you that your bigger kind of seam allowance make it a little bit more messy at the back, just use a little bit wider strip, maybe 1 1/4, and then you won't have that problem. Okay, so for the next step I will need some of those smaller scraps I've got in my box, like literally that size, some wonky ones, and I will snowball all of the corners in that kind of section now, but I'm not snowballing it in specific size or even specific direction. You just want to kind of trim off those corners here and make it a little bit rounded shape. Once you sew it, quilt it and move away to look at it, it will kind of all blend in, so don't stress here. Literally, like I said, I do not measure anything. I just want to get rid of some of that corner here, and I'm using my scraps for that. If you sew and open and that scrap you've chosen have not covered your corner here, just take another piece and stitch again. All of those seams will just add to the kind of dimension of that block, so I like seams. The more seams the better. So let's quickly snowball those now. And again, you can obviously chain piece if you're working on few blocks at a time. I'm just using smaller pieces because I don't need anything big to do those corners here. If you've got a foot like mine with that kind of blade on the side for the 1/4 inch, when you're shuffling it under, it may move the fabric, the one on the right side. Then just as you've seen, I kind of stopped, lift the foot up when it's happening, readjust and sew until it's done. Okay, so I've snowballed all my corners. Again, I will take it to the iron board and nicely open up. I think I've managed to choose the scraps which covering my corners all together. I'll just double check. Yeah, this one almost, yeah. So I don't have to add another piece. No, I've spoken too soon. Look, here is sticking out. I will just another small piece there just to cover it up. This one is just about, so it's just a small, one small piece here You don't want to stitch just at the kind of edge of it, you want to move that fabric a little bit lower, so later it's easier to stitch blocks together. But you just need this one small strip here. Okay, now it's covering. I will take it to the iron, open it up, and it will be the next step will be trimming to make sure we come back to our initial shape. Okay, took it from the iron, nice and flat, and quick trimming. I'll just turn it to the left side. I can see the edge of my block, and I just going with the edges of it. Nothing complicated here. Just to tidy up all of those edges around. Now this strip was 8 inches long, that's how we cut them, but my block is going to be 10.5 inches, so now I need to add from both sides some scraps of my black fabric to build it up to be at least 11 inches. I want to square it up later, so I will add some here until I build enough that putting this bit in the middle ish, again doesn't have to be exact, I will have that 11.5 inches or 11. Again, I'm just going through my scraps here, just pick few. Here I've got some, this is too small, this could go as a first piece here, then I could find something, another triangle to add here, until I've got about extra 2 inches here and extra 2 inches at the bottom, and that kind of should give me around the size I need to later kind of trim it to 10.5. I like I said, seam, so I don't mind how many of those scraps I will sew to the top and the bottom to achieve my kind of desired size. If it's easier for you, you could stitch some, scraps together first and then cut the relevant shape and add it to the sides. You would build them the way you would do a crumb block and you just cut the strip. I just like to go ahead and add them straight away. But again, you've got options here how it's easier to work for you. Okay, so I've built up my blocks. They are definitely longer a bit than I need. So this is when I was saying it's good to have a template of 10.5 inch if you don't have actual ruler that size, because then once you've put your template, you can see whether you're already there or you still need to add some strips at the top bottom. I'm good to go, so I will trim it, but I won't trim it yet to 10.5 inches because I want to use some starch after I add the sides and before I actually square it up. And starch can shrink a little bit of fabric, so if you want to starch your block like I do, do not make it 10.5 inch at this point, leave it a little bit of bigger. So as my ruler is, this is where I would like to trim it later. I'll just shift my ruler here at the top slightly up, trim the excess, and then I will do the same on the other side. Like I said, we will trim it to the actual size a little bit of later, so we don't have to worry about it yet, or even if I'm cutting it straight there. And then I do want to make nice and straight edges here, so I will just trim it all in one go. If something came wonky here, you can now nicely trim that edge to a straight line and do the other side as well. Here we go. So that's the start point to finish off this block. So as mentioned, I've cut all the remaining fabric from the bed sheet to 5 inches. So I will take my scraps here now and I will add that 5 inch to the both of the sides, and that should give me enough dimension later to trim it to 10.5 inch square. So let's add those in and see how the block looks when it's done. Now this 5 inch piece is obviously bigger than I need, so I will trim it before I get to the ends, because that's a lot of fabric I can use in another place in this project. I will just fold it, make it a little bit longer than that piece which is sticking under it, and just trim it off before I finish. Again, here you could you know, trim those 5-inch strips to the size before you start stitching. I just like to go with the flow really, but you could prep them a little bit better, cut them to perhaps 11 inches length, and that will be just about what you need to finish off those blocks. So either way is fine, and do what you prefer. Going to take those blocks to the iron now, and this is the point I will starch it and iron with the starch, so they will be nice and crisp, ready to be trimmed to the right size. Here's the block from the ironing board. So I'm taking my ruler. If you got bigger ruler, obviously you can use it as well. You will just kind of find your points, 10.5 inch. You may use some painter's tape to kind of highlight those lines so it's easier to follow. I've got actual ruler, so I will use that. So you want to center that colorful piece, but it doesn't have to be exactly in the center. Just eyeball it, don't measure anything, see how it fits more or less, and then you just trim all around, making it nice and square. Okay, and block 1 is finished. Let's get going with the block 2. So we're starting with the wider strip. We want to trim it to 10 inches this time. I'm just kind of aligning my ruler, seeing which parts of that strip I want to leave. You just go with what the fabric you like. That's my one edge and the other edge. So those strips, like I've mentioned, are 10 inches long. How wide? Whatever scraps you've got. I'm just using the wider strips I had left from my previous projects. Let me see if this one is 10 inches because it's quite nice and wide. Just about a little bit shorter. That's fine. It's not end of the world if one of them is a little bit shorter. You won't even notice. Okay, so here I'm missing a little bit to the 10 inch. I can either trim it off straight, but actually we will be snowballing those corners again, so I don't mind I'm missing here because I will cover it with the black fabric. And like with the previous block, I will take some of my black scraps and then I will snowball those corners. And again, I'm not measuring anything. It doesn't have to be in the same spot. It doesn't have to be in the same kind of length. However you feel, that's how you snowball those corners. Just leave some gap here with the fabric sticking out. Don't snowball to overlap. That's the only thing. Other than that, you do what you like. One thing I think I haven't mentioned in this tutorial, though I'm sure I've mentioned in the one of the last two, is that when you put in your fabric to snowball your corner, the fabric needs to stick out on the both sides, at least of the width of your seam allowance. If it's sticking out more, it's even better. It's just to make sure that because it's on the angle, when you open it up, it's all covered. Okay, so I did my snowballs. As you can see, they are all different. I did iron it. I removed the excess. I'm not removing any of those things. I'm just leaving them as they are. And similar to the block 1, I need to add the top and bottom, but this block is not gonna be straight. It's gonna be on diagonal, and this is why I was saying that it's good to have some sort of paper template made, because it will kind of help you out to see how much do you need to add. Now I'm gonna be using some small scraps to kind of build it until I go overlap my ruler. If you're cutting from bigger piece, probably around 3-inch strip should be enough to do that, but just test it. Cut a small piece of 3-inch, see if it add it to both sides and see if it's enough. If not, you may like to do 3¼ or 3½ inch. So like with the block 1, I will add it on top and bottom until I've got enough, and then I will add the sides, and then again I will be adding them until I've got enough. So I will be using all of those scraps as much as I can to build it up, and then I will square it. as you can see, I've ironed my block and I trimmed them on the side, so they are now nice and straight. And now I can double check that they are covered by my ruler, which they are. This piece does not need to be dead center. Again, it's nothing to measure, just more or less. And if you had like a lot of excess beyond the points of your ruler or template, if that's what you're using, just trim it so you don't use up a lot of fabric when you add to the sides. So I still got some of those 5-inch strips left from the first block, so I will use that. And I suggest you do 1 or 2 blocks at a time, and that's because that if you're using bigger pieces, once you trim it, all of those offcuts here you may be able to use up in next block for the corners, because this is not gonna be enough to cover my ruler. So I still need some sort of smaller pieces, which I may have had from cutting something earlier, and then I will be able to use it up on the sides. Or here I've got a piece of shirt, so that was the top of the sleeve. That would be perfect shape here to add to the side to cover the ruler on both sides. And once I trim it, whatever is left I will use for the next block. Okay, so this is the block. As you can see, I've got those 5 inches here, and then I just added kind of like a flaps on the side to make it big enough for me to then put a ruler and obviously square all around it. So you can use, you know, all those smaller scraps you may have in your buckets. And just before we'll go to the design board, let me just show you some of those blocks I kind of trimmed already. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces here of the fabric. You really use up all of the scraps you've got. 1, 2, 3 on both sides. And then the remaining scraps, no problem. Anything what I've got here, I have been putting into a crumb blocks. Block 3 is a crumb block, and as you can see, they've got lots of seams. There are, I think, 3 shades of the black fabric here, which gives another dimension to that block. I just love those blocks. Those one color blocks, especially if they are solids, they look really awesome. So those are 3 designs or 3 blocks we'll be putting together in the pattern. Just to add before we go to the design board, before kind of taking it to the trim, in the last ironing I like to use a spray starch because it then keeps all of those seams nice and flat for you to work with. Otherwise it might be a little bit of flimsy. I've been using black thread on this one, but I wouldn't mind to use white or cream either. Just remember, if you're using very contrasting thread, you want to narrow down your stitch length to about 1/8, 1/7, then it will not be visible on your right side. Okay, let's get to design board. I will first show you how you can mix those blocks, what you can do just from block 1, what you can just do from block 2, mix up with the crumbs, and then my own design, and I will tell you a little bit about where the name came from. Before I show you my finished project, just a quick reminder where you can find me and how you can support my work. You can subscribe to my website to be notified when new tutorials, products or patterns are released. You can find me on my Facebook page, Pola Photo, or you can join my group page, Pola Quilting with Friends, where we all share work made inspired by my tutorials and answer any questions you may have. There is Instagram account called Pola Quilting, and if you like to share something you made based on my tutorials, please tag me using hashtag Pola Quilting with Friends. To support my work, please like, comment and share when you see my posts or tutorials. Let your quilting friends know about this channel and invite them to the group and subscribe to my channel. If you like to contribute extra, you can use super thanks on YouTube or buying me virtual tea, coffee or lunch available on my page. All links are in the description below. I would like to thank you all for all the support so far and letting me grow in what I do. Have a look at this selection of the designs you can put together from the strip blocks. They look awesome in any combination. So depending what scraps you have in your buckets, or maybe you have some adding tape strips, you can make one type of the middle rather than one with sashing, and then just crack on with the design. I definitely love the crumbs. Can't wait to quilt and wash it to see how they will look after that, a little bit crinkled with all of those seams in between. I had an issue with finding a name for this design, so I've asked lovely people on the Facebook group, and they have provided me with plenty of some suggestions, and some of those suggestions even gave me some ideas for next tutorial, so thank you very much for that. On this occasion, the name is a combination of the names provided by Ingrid and Linny, and I've called it Midnight Fireworks. The last picture shows you how it will look. I do miss some crumbs still, so you know, the crumbs take a little bit longer to make, but you can have an idea how it will look with all of those places filled in, and as soon as it's completed, I'll make sure I will share it with you on social media and YouTube as well. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this vlogs and perhaps you give it a go using your own scraps. And if you do, don't forget to share and tag me if you make it. Thank you for joining, thank you for watching, and see you next time.